Hi, my name is Jyllian E-Lyse, and today I'll be presenting on my Programming Principles final project, a computer versus human tic-tac-toe game. Before I get into the actual code, I'd like to first give a simple overview on my code breakdown. Firstly, in this game, the human player will always make the first move as X, and once the human player has made a move, the computer will then make a random move as O, which has been selected with the random choice function. After every move, the user-defined check-win function will be used to check if there is a win or tie, and once a win or tie is detected, the game will then end. In this project, I've used 7 different programming techniques, namely input and display data, lists and file processing, random choice from a list, if statements, relational and logical operators, user-defined functions, loops, and additionally, exception handling. I'll first start off with input and display data, whereby the program prompts the player to enter their name with the input function. The program will then proceed to display a welcome message with a print function, followed by the player's name to greet the player in order to create the sense of personalization for the player. Besides that, I've also used the integer input function to allow the player to make their choice of position on the board. This player input will then be printed onto the board using my player input function. For lists and file processing, I used a list to create my spaces on the board, which I have surrounded with apostrophes to create blank spaces. As for file processing, I have utilized the open function followed by my file name and a W, which stands for write, in order to create a file for data writing. Below my player input function, I used file.write to log the player's moves based on the position that they have chosen. As for the randomly generated computer moves, I used the import random to import the random library, and then created a list called comp_list to list all possible moves on the board. After that, the random.choice function is used to choose a position for the O to be placed in. If the space chosen is blank, then the O is printed onto the board. Besides that, I also used if statements to check for wins and ties. For example, I used that if board 0 equals to board 1 equals to board 2, which is the first top row, and board 0 is not a blank, meaning that the whole row is either all X's or all O's, then the winner would be board 0, which is either X or O depending on what symbol has been placed there. This same method is actually then used again for checking other rows, checking columns, and also to check matching diagonals. In the code shown above, the check win is used to check if there is a winner while game running is true. If game running is true and there is a match, then the winner statement is printed. For the check diag function, when a winner is detected, then it would return true. And these are my logical and relational operators. Besides that, I also used a lot of user-defined functions, namely player input, print board, comp input, switch player, check hori, check diag, check verti, and check win to ensure that my code stays organized. Loops were also used in my program as a way to keep the game running while the game running variable was true. When a winner or a tie is detected by the check-win function, game running will equal to false and the loop will eventually stop. For exception handling, I used try_except to prevent users from entering invalid input and inserted a print statement to print an error message which prompted them to try again until they have entered valid input. And if they enter a number which is below 1 and more than 9, I would also ask them to try again because their input is invalid. That's all for my slide presentation, so now I'll be moving on to my game demonstration. Okay, so when the program starts, the user will be prompted to input their name, and then after that a welcome message will be printed, and then the instructions will also be printed. So as you can see, it prints out the positions of where their symbol will be placed when the input is put in. I also added the rows and columns that correspond to each number that the user inputs just for clarity. And what I'm going to show first is what happens if I enter invalid input. Like, I'll write hello because that's a word, and it'll tell me that I have entered invalid input and that I should pick a number between 1 to 9. But let's say what happens if I choose a number that is greater than 9 or below 1. So let's say I'm going to choose 10. It will tell me that this spot has already been taken or is unavailable and pick again. And basically, this error message will keep popping up as long as I don't put valid input. Now I'm going to show what will happen if I do put valid input like 1. So X is printed into row 1, column 1, and then after that the computer will make a move as O. So I'm just gonna keep playing moves until the computer wins because I just want to show how that works. Okay, so once the computer has won and there's 3 O's in a row, it will say that the winner is O. And all these moves are actually also logged into the log file. So here's just the log file for reference. So as you can see, the move count, who's the player, the row, the column, and also the symbol that has been used has been logged successfully into the log file. Now my demonstration will be on what happens if the player wins. So if the player wins, the winner message will pop up and say the winner is X, symbolizing me, the player. Now I'll just be demonstrating what will happen if there is a tie with me and the computer. Alright, so as you can see, because that all the spaces are filled already and there is no matching columns, rows, or diagonals, it will identify it as a tie, and then the word tie will be printed. That's all for my presentation and demonstration on my final project for programming principles. Thank you.